what's up guys? This is Ghost Rider 15 here, back on the Table One Gaming channel. I know it's been a while since I've made a video. I have been busy, been doing things, but lately I've been playing a lot of Go format. So I've decided to make my own tier list. I have it labeled here as Tier 1, which is the meta. Basically, Tier 1 deck is going to be a deck that almost always makes top 8 at a big tournament. And then Tier 2 is rogue decks, decks that can sneak in a couple of tops here and there, has potential. And then Tier 3 is basically the decks that you shouldn't be playing. So let's get started. First we have Burn. Burn is a really strong deck. Game 1. It's a really powerful deck. It basically can steal the game just by bringing your opponent's life points down with cards like Just Desserts or Secret Barrel. It doesn't really care much about card advantage. You can have as many cards as you want in your hand, and if your life points are really low, you're still going to lose against this deck. And it runs a bunch of floodgates, so it's a really strong deck, game 1. But game 2 and 3, it does suffer from losing to cards like Royal Decree. If Royal Decree is going to be a really popular card in the side deck, this deck is really going to struggle. So for that reason, I'm going to put the deck at Tier 2. Next we have Soul Control. Soul Control for a while wasn't really doing much, but recently Chris Perovic has made a new list with Soul Control that's been doing really well. He made top 8 at an Obelisk tournament, which I played against him, and it was a really good deck. The deck can take advantage of cards like Soul Exchange and get rid of face down monsters. Usually it's really hard to get rid of face down monsters besides Noble Mana Crossout. There is cards like Mind Control, but it is risky, and Soul Exchange is basically almost not risky at all. And they do play Royal Decree, so they don't worry about trap cards. The only thing is, you still are playing tribute monsters, so your deck can brick sometimes. But the deck does have a lot of potential, so I'm gonna put it at Tier 2. Next is the Pacman deck. Pacman is a really annoying deck, but it is pretty strong, especially game 1. They do play a lot of cards like Gravity Bind, Level Limit Area B that can stop you from doing anything. So you really have to hold on to your back row removal for those cards. And the fact that they can just keep flipping themselves face up and face down continuously every turn is really broken. So if you let them go off, they can keep gaining so much advantage. But again, same problem with Burn, game 2 and 3, is that if your opponent is citing cards like Royal Decree or any back row removal, the deck does struggle. And Mind Control is also pretty good against this deck, because you can use all of their monsters to gain advantage. So like there's one monster that pops back row. If they do set that one, you can just pop their floodgate with Mind Control. So the deck's not terrible, but it's not amazing, so I'm gonna put it at Tier 2. The next deck we have here is Last Turn, OTK, or FTK, whatever it is. So the deck, it's pretty good, but similar to the other two decks that I mentioned, Bird and Pacman, the deck it struggles with back row removal. It relies so much on having Last Turn and Jowgen, so the deck is not going to function well if you can stop those two cards, because it's really its only win condition. So out of all the alt-win decks, I think this is probably the weakest one. So I'm just gonna put this at tier 3. Next we have Warriors. Warriors, probably one of the best decks in the format. Actually, yeah, one of the best decks in the format. It can get rid of flip effect monsters like nothing because of Blade Knight and Mystic Swordsman. It can get rid of cards from your opponent's hand because of Donzalug. It can banish your opponent's monsters from the graveyard because of Kaiku. And they play Reinforcement of the Army, so you can basically get any card you need in whatever situation you're in. And the deck is really consistent because it doesn't play any tribute monsters. It doesn't really play anything that bricks. And it could also take advantage of BLS and Chaos Sorcerer because most of their monsters are light and dark. And it's really hard to side deck against this deck because they do have a lot of answers to cards like a Cliff, and they can just get rid of your back row with Cliff. There are cards like Messenger of Peace to try to deal with the deck, but again, Cliff can get over that. Donzalug can just attack because it's at 1400. The deck is really broken. It's tier 1 for sure. Then we have Cyberstein OTK. Really strong deck. It can steal wins like nothing, and it's probably the best deck that can abuse Giant Trunade. But once your opponent catches on to what your plan is, they can just call level 2 for reasoning, and that does hurt. And if the opponent is side decking cards like Royal Tribute, it can be really bad for you if you don't have Giant Trunade or Heavy Storm. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the deck at tier 3. Gearfried. Basically, Gearfried I think is the weaker version of standard Warriors. Cause you're still playing Warriors, but you're playing like the less stronger version of it. Gearfried, it can be really strong if you combo it off with Smokescreen or Smoke Grenade, because you can basically rip any card you want from your opponent's hand, which is obviously really broken. But the thing is that it's not consistent. The deck's not consistent. It doesn't have like those really strong plays that you see other decks have. And for that reason, I'm just gonna put it at tier 3. The next deck I have here is Tiger Stun. Pretty strong deck, but the issue here is that King Tiger Wangu is a bit outdated. It is still really strong against decks like Chaos Control or Standard Go Control, because they do play Scapegoats and they rely on it a lot. So King Tiger Wangu does come in play there, but again, King Tiger Wangu is a bit outdated. There are cards that are stronger than it that can just run it over. So I think this is basically an outdated version of aggro. I'm gonna go ahead and put it at tier 3. Then we have the water deck, the water Umi deck. It's not so great because its strategy relies a lot on a field spell, and even then, the monsters that try to take advantage of this card aren't really that good. Like basically, Daedalus probably your best monster to blow up your opponent's board, but it's not consistent. It's a 2 tribute monster without the field spell. The field spell is likely not going to stay on board for so long. And if you open up multiples of like the field spell or Daedalus, it's not good. So for that reason, I'm gonna put the deck at tier 3. Now we have Chaos Flip Control. I think this deck is really good, and despite it not having so many tops recently, I still think the deck has a lot of potential. Basically, it takes advantage of cards like Jar of Greed and Trap Dust Shoot and Solemn Judgment. You can easily grab them back with Mask of Darkness, and you can keep recycling them with Tsukiyomi. And it also plays a lot of other cards that Chaos Turbo plays and Chaos Control, like Thunder Dragon and Night Assailant. So I think this deck has a lot of potential. People just need to keep playing it more, and it's gonna get more tops, I think. I'm gonna put it at tier 1. Next we have Chaos Control. Chaos Control is, I think, a really good deck. The problem with Chaos Control is that not many people play it because it's probably the hardest deck to play in the format. There's so many decisions you have to make with the deck, and there's more plays. And I think that with the right pilot, this deck is really hard to beat. It can take advantage of Metamorphosis, and you can use the extra deck to make a lot of good plays, like make Balter, Ryu Senshi. They're all really good cards, and then you're still playing your standard Chaos package like Chaos Sorcerer and BLS. So overall, this deck is tier 1. Next we have Empty Jar. Empty Jar is a really annoying deck. Really powerful. Doesn't let your opponent play at all. There's not really much to side deck against this deck. You can side cards like Neko Main King, and Royal Oppression is actually pretty decent against this deck because it can negate Cyber Jar, and it can negate that one card, I forgot its name, the one that you special summon from the graveyard and lets your opponent special summon a monster. Can't think of its name right now, but it's really broken in an Empty Jar. But the deck does lose to itself sometimes. If you don't open up cards like Book of Tayu or any Cyber Jar or Morphine Jar monsters, it's probably gonna lose. So I'll go ahead and put this at tier 2. Next we have Gravekeepers. Gravekeepers is a really interesting strategy because it can use cards like Necro Valley to basically shut down the Chaos Engine. If you shut down the Chaos Engine, you're in a good position because you also shut down Night Assailants, Magician of Faiths, Premature Burial, and Call the Haunted against Warriors is a good thing to stop. But the problem with Gravekeepers is that it doesn't really have any real big monsters besides your boosted up Gravekeeper monsters from Necro Valley. And once Necro Valley's out, you really don't have any beaters at all, really. So it's hard to win without Necro Valley. For that reason, I think the deck is tier 3. Next we have Chaos Turbo. Chaos Turbo, basically a really fast deck. Takes advantage of a lot of cards like Graceful Charity. Some people like Card Destruction, which is really good also. If you have the double Night Assailant combo, or if you have cards like Thunder Dragon or Sinister, it plays the standard Chaos package. And it takes advantage of cards like Regeki Break, which is really good because it's so versatile. You can hit anything. Some people play Wing Blast, which is also pretty decent. Right now, Turbo has the highest representage at big premier events. It's been doing really well. I play the deck all the time almost, and it's been doing really well for me. The deck is definitely tier 1. Then we have Chaos Return, the deck that plays Bazoo. It's a really strong deck if you can set up your Mizzou plays, banish stuff with Chaos Sorcerer, and this deck can steal a lot of wins. If you don't use your cards correctly against this deck, you can end up losing. Basically, the deck is just overall really solid. The main problem with this deck is that you are relying on Return from a Different Dimension pretty often, and you might have to preemptively use it, which is really bad because you do have to pay half your life points. And if you do set this card pretty early, it does lose to stuff like Breaker, so you have to be really careful on how you play this deck. But overall, it has had some success in recent tournaments. Not a lot, but it has had some success. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it at tier 2. Next we have Royal Magical Library FTK. Probably the most annoying deck in the entire format. The deck is basically a coin toss. If they go first and if they open the right combo, there's nothing you can do. There's no side deck for this deck at all if you're going second. Basically, if they have it, they have it. There's nothing you can do. The only way this deck loses is by losing to itself. If it does brick, you win. There's nothing they can do. So, for that reason, I'm just gonna put it at tier 2. Next we have Reasoning Gate. Reasoning Gate has been seeing a good amount of popularity at tournaments and on Dueling Book Ladder. A lot of people play this deck, and I can see why. It's really strong and takes advantage of cards like Monster Gate and Reasoning. If they're able to hit Democ, Dark Magician of Chaos, they can just win the game right there. They have cards like Lightning Vortex, Giant Trunade to clear the opponent's board, and they also play Dimensional Fusion, so they just bring back their entire board that they banished and can OTK you right there on the spot. The deck also does lose to itself, unfortunately. You do play a lot of tribute monsters like Air Knight, Democ is a tribute monster, Jinzo is a tribute monster. So if you do draw these monsters in your turn 1 hand, it can be really bad for you. And the deck does lose to cards like Royal Oppression and Jowgen. So it's pretty easy to side deck against this deck if you really do want to beat it. It's not hard to side against it. So for that reason, I'm just going to put it at tier 2. Next we have Shining Angel Chaos. Shining Angel Chaos hasn't really been seen a lot of play lately. I play really often on Dueling Book Ladder, and I almost never run into the deck. But it does have a lot of potential. Recruiters are always really strong. Probably the best thing about Shining Angel Chaos is that it doesn't lose to Mind Control. Because if you do side deck Mind Control against this version of Chaos, you have to be really careful with how you play Mind Control. You don't want to use it on their set monsters most of the time because odds are you're gonna get a Shining Angel from it, and you just go -1. So I think the deck is tier 2. Next we have Go Control. So Go Control has lost a lot of popularity. The reason being is that the deck doesn't play Thunder Dragon, and it doesn't really play any Chaos monsters besides BLS. And the problem with Thousand Eyes Restrict is that it limits you on how aggressive you can play. So yeah, you can keep taking their monsters with Thousand Eyes plus Tsukiyomi, but you can't really play aggressive because you only have one attack per turn with Thousand Eyes because nothing else can attack. And the deck has also lost one of its most popular monsters recently, Air Knight Parshath, because the rise of Gravekeeper Spy. So the deck now has to play Zaborg, the Monarch, because of that. And I think the deck is in a really awkward spot right now. It's not bad, but it's not amazing either. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it at tier 2. Next we have is Panda Burn. Panda Burn is a really interesting deck because although it does play typical burn cards like Just Desserts or Secret Barrel, it also plays really aggressive cards like Rescue Cat, that panda monster that does piercing damage, and they also play Injection Fairy Lily, which can do a lot of damage. So right now I think this deck is in a really good spot. I've been seeing it a lot more often on Dueling Book Ladder, and with the rise of Solemn Judgment in a lot of decks right now, I think this deck has a lot of potential because this deck thrives on people playing Solemn Judgment. It can easily steal the game just because your opponent activated a Solemn Judgment. So for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and put this at tier 2. Next we have Zombies. Zombies, Vampire Lord is a pretty good card overall. Doesn't lose to cards like Torrential, Mirror Force, doesn't even lose to Solemn Judgment. So Vampire Lord is pretty good, but the main issue with Vampire Lord is that it doesn't run over Gravekeeper Spy, which is really popular right now, and it is a tribute monster. I know you can bring it out with Pyramid Turtle, but if you do happen to draw it in your hand, it can be pretty bad. But the deck does also play cards like Book of Life, which is pretty good because you can banish your opponent's Sinister Serpents or their Light and Darks to revive any monster you want, or any zombie monster you want. And it's not a continuous spell or trap, so it doesn't lose to MST. So that's pretty solid. But the thing is that the deck doesn't really have any way to do a bunch of damage and any way to gain any huge amount of huge amount of advantage. So I don't think the deck is that great. I'm gonna put it at tier 3. And then last I have the Machine Return with runs Defusion and Chaos Sorcerer and BLS. Tries to steal the game with limiter removal. Pretty interesting deck. It can win because there are times where you go into damage step and your opponent's not going to be expecting limiter removal. So you can steal games like that. But the problem is you do have to play normal monsters in this deck, and normal monsters are almost never good. So yeah, you do lose a lot of power there. But yeah, I think this deck it's not seeing a lot of play for a good reason. It's just not that good. I'm gonna go ahead and put that at tier 3. And there you have it, guys. That's basically my Go format 2021 tier list. Let me know in the comment section down below if you agree, if you disagree. This is Table 1 Gaming signing out.